So right now I'm going to show you a few more advanced additional tools in Illustrator. I will start with something really simple. So it's going to be blend tool. So the blend tool is located in here, but first I'm going to create let's say square. Maybe let's just go with red color. And the second object that I'm going to create would be a star. So the star is available also in here. So when I create star, just a reminder, probably I've mentioned about it, but if you during the creation, if you use your arrows on the keyboard, you can add additional elements to the star. So it will look, for example, more like that. And if you click Control, you can actually make all the elements a little bit more pointy or smaller, so depending on what you need. So maybe let's create something like this. So right now we've created two elements. We've got a rectangle and we've got this badge. If I'm going to use the blend tool, first I'm going to double click on it, and I've got different options in here. So in my case, like specified steps are 8 at this point. Maybe let's lower it to 4, so it will be a little bit more easy to recognize. So just 4 steps, and I will deselect everything and use my blend tool. So I will click on the blend tool, click on my first element, and then click on the second element. So what has actually happened? We are not able to see it clearly, so I will just select this rectangle. Okay, let's scale it down a little bit. So what I've did is I've actually blended the rectangle into this badge. And how I did it is by once again using this blend tool. So let's double click. So you can see that I specified that I want to have 4 steps. And the steps are all the steps that are between final object and the first object. So sometimes this could be like really useful, and sometimes allows you to be creative in a little bit different way. So let me show you. So if I create my first rectangle, and once again the second object, I will create a star. Maybe let's have a little bit more angles at it. So we have one object and we have second object. So as you can see, I've got Adobe Color Theme open in here. I will click on the first object to have this color, and I will click on the second object to have this color. And if I do exactly the same on this element and on second element, you can actually able to see that it's starting to look interesting. So because of the transition between the colors, maybe we should have more steps. So let's click Ctrl Z, let's double click in here, and let's add 8 steps, so the transition would be a little bit smoother. So once again, blend tool, first object, second object, and if I change my rectangle, for example, to be like this, maybe let's create the star to be even bigger, maybe something like this. You can see we are getting this interesting background for if we need it. So it's like we can do this like in a really simple way, but we can also have this element like used much more creatively to have some abstract shapes, to have some completely different results. So if I would select this, maybe rotate it, you can see it will start behave once again a little bit different. So we are able to modify how it behaves. Of course, on our final image we will be only seeing those elements that are in our work area. So anything outside would not be visible. So this is the first approach how to use this tool. Let me show you the simple approach with different objects. So I will just create I will just create a line. So right now there is only path without a stroke. If I add the stroke, so let's maybe use white color. We can even make it smaller. So right now I've got 4 points and one line. I will duplicate the line, and once again I will do the same what I did before, just change the amount of steps. Maybe let's use 15. And I will click on this and click in here. I think 15 may be not enough even, so let's double click and maybe let's go with 30. And what I would do is I will actually make it thinner, so like those lines would have only 2 points. So once again, blend tool in here, and click on those 2 elements. Okay, so right now we are able to modify those lines. Once again, similar what we did with our background, but we can go even further. So we can do something like this. We can use anchor point tool, or maybe let's add anchor point. It would be easier to actually manipulate with it. So we can do it like this. We can use anchor point tool to convert, to make it a little bit different. And let's add the same thing to our another element. Once again, anchor point tool to convert, so it would not be a straight line but something more fluid. Of course, in your case it could be it could look a little bit different. So we can add this as an element in here. We can change the opacity to be barely like visible, to have it like this. And as you can see, this blend tool allows us on lot of different elements to create either some abstract shapes or some interesting like transitions. Maybe one more example. So what I would do is I will create standard star. So once again I'm creating I'm using the star tool, but I'm changing the amount of my angles in star, so something like this would be fine. So this would be my first element. Maybe let's use as a first color once again this color. Let's disable the stroke. Let's duplicate the arrow. Let's change the color to this one. Let's make it smaller. Let's rotate it a little bit. And once again, let's see what our what would be the result with our tool. So because we have lots of like 30 steps, we are getting this kind of interesting gradient in a sense. Like still it's the same what we've seen before. As you can see, like there is a lot of different shapes, but generally the result is a little bit different. And once again, I can grab this, double click on it, grab this layer and rotate it, make it smaller to achieve different results. So this is something that I find very interesting. It's not something that I use too much when I design elements, but for abstract backgrounds this works. For me this works pretty well. It's quite easy to use. So the next useful tool would be width tool, and actually this is quite specific tool, and I use it very often on some shapes. Right now I will try just to give you some example with some swirly shapes how we can use it. Okay, so but before we do it, let me show you something else. Like we've got a tool called paintbrush tool. So if I paint with it, this is the result that I get. And sometimes the result may be different, because when this tool is active, you've got two options here on the right, in the right side. If I click on it, you can see that there is this option called fidelity. It can be accurate or smooth. So let's use accurate. Let's click OK, and let's try to make something like this, and you can see like this line is not looking perfect. But if I do similar line but with smooth setting, we are getting much more smooth line. So this looks like completely different. So for me, I think like something like this may okay, maybe let's delete, and maybe let me create like I'm using mouse for it. I'm not using a graphic tablet. It would be much more easy to do it, but let's just use this to create this line. Okay, so I've created this line, but what I can do right now with it, and by default it created it with 5-point round brush, so I will change it to basic. And right now I will click on the tool that is called width tool. So if I click on the width tool, and I can grab it in any place, so I can do something like this. But in my case I want to grab it at the bottom, so I want to have this looking more like some kind of plant that is getting thinner in the end. Of course you are able to modify it any way that you prefer, so this gives you a lot of opportunities. Okay, so let's try to create another step for us, and I will use, this time I will use spiral tool. And spiral tool is kind of specific, so by default it may look different in your case, so sometimes it's good to click Control and to play with it. So you can see I can change how the spiral actually behaves with Control. You have to do it by yourself to figure it out, or we can so you will actually find something that will work. So just experiment with Control button, and this should help you a lot. So if we want to have only part of a spiral, this would be fine. If we want to modify it even further, we can use Shift. In my case, I would prefer to have it like a little bit more swirly, maybe something like this. Let's make it bigger. And let's do the same thing that we did just a moment ago. I can grab this width tool, maybe something like this. So right now I can just duplicate the layer, rotate it, click transform, and reflect. I've duplicated it, sorry. This could be smaller because it's higher. Can grab it once again, or maybe this one would work better. Of course, if we would like to modify this or create a new element, maybe sometimes it would look even better. Okay, so maybe let's me delete it, and let's use once again the spiral tool, so the shape would not be exactly the same, it would be more interesting. So I will once again click Control, maybe add a little bit more of the spiral right now, right click, transform, reflect, click on OK, and I can choose color picker and select this. And as you can see, when I selected color picker, it does not behave like it's supposed to be. So what is actually happening? Well, actually the stroke at this point is a different than in here. And why is it happening? Well, let me show you. So if I click in here, you can see the variable width profile that I've just created using the width tool on this, let's call it leaf. And if I click in here, the profile is different, but I can select the same, or I can create one more. So if I click in here, I can click here, I can click on add to profiles to create another profile. I can grab my element, I can go to stroke and select profile to use this profile. So right now we will have, this will be our image. Okay, maybe this should be smaller right now. So this is very simple tool actually, the width tool. Like maybe I've explained it in a little bit more difficult way than it's supposed to be, but This allows us to create this kind of interesting shapes. So let's use another example just on let's say line. So once again, width tool, we select this. This is important that you got this small plus icon, so you are able to actually create it correctly. So right now okay, we can make it smaller. Maybe let's grab this, make it thicker. So one more time. So if I try to create a line and I will use width tool right away, this is important that you get this plus icon. If the plus icon next to the cursor is not visible, this means that sometimes you need to deselect everything. Once again, select the element that you need, select the width tool, and you need to have this plus icon that will actually allow you to modify everything. So this is one of our elements, and with this we can once again make it smaller, and as you can see, it's not scaling proportionally because this is working as a stroke. So it's the stroke, it's not the fill color. If we want to make it work as a stroke, we need to click on object. If we want to behave as a standard object, we need to click on the object and click expand appearance. Okay, so the next useful tool is appearance tool. It's let me explain by example. So if we want to, let's say, create a team logo, but this kind of American university style with the stroke. So we've got our letter, let's switch the color to dark red, and let's add black. Okay, maybe let's start with gray stroke, or maybe switch it to black so everything would be a little bit more visible. So right now I've added the stroke, but as you can see, the problem with the stroke is that it's on the center of the letter. So if the stroke is getting bigger, the red color starts to disappear and it's not looking great. We need to have the stroke underneath our letter. So of course I could do it in a different way, like I could duplicate this image, I could disable the stroke, I could change the color of the stroke and of the fill to black. I could grab once again this element, put it on the top, and this way it will work fine. So once again, if I would like to make it thicker, I will select both of the layers, deselect this layer with shift, and add the stroke. So it's not a big of a deal, but there is much easier way, and let me show it. And especially if we need to change something, add some element, it just stops works when we change anything in our letters. But with this, with the solution that I'm going to show, it will be much easier. So what I would do is I will click on appearance, and I will start with fill color. So I will click on new fill color. It automatically overrides the old one. I will switch it to red. I will add new stroke. Let's make a stroke a little bit thicker. So right now we have the same problem like we have before, but I can grab my stroke layer, so I needed to grab it somewhere in here. I can put it underneath my fill. I can make it a little bit thicker. And what I can do is I can even add another stroke. So I will click on another stroke. Let me change it to maybe this kind of gray. Let's put it underneath the black. Let's make it bigger. So this way we've got two strokes, and much more it's done in much more easy way. And if I change anything, it will still work fine. So we can go with this even further. So if we've got, let's say this is the part of our logo, we can go to make envelope. We already know this function, but just to remind you, maybe let's use arc. Let's make it barely like the bend barely visible, and maybe sorry, not horizontal but vertical modification. So something like this to have this kind of perspective. So just click OK, and we've got this like simple typography done in no time. If we double click on it, we can change the text, and it still should work fine. So just I've accidentally created another layer. So the appearance tool that is available in here, if it's not visible, you can always go to Windows and find it in here. When it comes to text, I want to show you one more tool that is pretty useful sometimes. It's kind of specific, and to use it we have to get into a specific situation, but I find it sometimes very helpful. So there is this random text in here, and you've got in type tool, like if you right click on it, you've got a tool called touch type tool. So if we click on it, we are actually able to select a singular letter, and we are able to move it, modify it, change the placement, so it will all look like it's more random. Sometimes you can find like this situation for it, especially when you're designing the logo that is basing on some kind of typography, and it looks like more funky or in a strange way. So this could be much more useful, and we are able to do like a lot of stuff. Right now I'm only rotating and moving, but actually, of course, you are able to change the size of the letters, the colors of the letters, much more easy than normally. So if we have something like this, and we've got random text, we are able to change the text, which is good. So if I need to change the letter, I can change the letter, correct it later if necessary. I am able to change the font. So normally we would be able to do it just only after we convert it to outlines, but right now we are able to still work on the text and actually see maybe if different font would work more interesting on it. So just to find something that will work for us. Okay, so one last trick for today, and once again it's going to be connected with typography. So let me show you what we are going to do. So I will just write some word. In my case it would be kiss. Let me use different fonts. So I will use this font at the start, and what I want to do is I want to create the shape of ellipse. So we can actually create it in a few different ways, but let's use the tools that we got to know today. So I will create just a simple line, add some really thin uniform stroke, and let's use width tool. So I will click on the width tool and I will make it wider. So I have something like this. It's still lacking some of the elements to remind the lips, but what we can do is we can click in here, go to object, click on expand appearance, and the next step that I would like to add is to modify by using direct selection tool to modify where this anchor is. So I can put it a little bit lower, maybe even get rid of the Bezier controllers. I could play with it a little bit more, but I think it would be fine. So I will just make it like thicker, so something like this. So I've got two elements, the word kiss and the lips that are in here. I will put the lips on top. So this is important. Let me show you. Let's change the color for a moment. So I will put the lips on top. I will select both of the elements together. I will go to object, envelope distort, and use make with top object. And this is the result. Actually, it fits our typography to fit to the object that was on top. So this is our object, and what is really cool about it is I can duplicate it, I can double click on it, and I can use different font. Let's try this font, whether it will work or not. So yeah, it's not looking so much interesting, but let's see a few different approaches. Maybe one of them would work better. So we can use scroll on the mouse just to use different to see how different fonts would work. I don't know why this ST, how it showed up. This is strange. let me duplicate. I think it was some strange font that behaved not natural. So we can click on this. I think the first one was the most interesting. Maybe let's just scroll and find. In my opinion, the thick font looked the best in most of the cases. So this is what I've created. It's rather simple, nothing fancy, but sometimes very useful, especially if you are creating logo that is based on typography.